Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. And for those of you currently watching in the restroom on your cell phone, get back to work. The country needs you. Today's guest is an enigma. He's a musician. He's an author. He's an advocate. And on top of it, on top of all three of those things, he made not only time to talk to us today, but he's the nicest guy in the world. You may know him as Joe the Policeman from the What's Going Down episode of That's My Mama. But I know him as a guitar player for the Zac Brown Band and all-around nice guy. Coy Bowles, put your hands together in an effort for Coy Bowles. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, but do it anyway. Thank you. Go through the motions. Coy, welcome to the Sound Horizons podcast, presented by Toontrack.
What's up, man?
You know what? We were just talking about the fact that you are in lovely Hotlanta, Georgia, enjoying one of the nicer times of the year, getting into the weather. And as a longtime touring musician yourself, obviously with Zac Brown Band, do you have this sort of clock that goes off in your head when the weather starts getting nicer that it's time to pack and hit the bus because we're probably going to be out for most of the nice weather this year? Or are you at peace with that part of your life?
Oh man, I stay so busy that I am the worst when it comes to where I'm at, what I'm doing, what's coming up next. I mean, I think it was Monday of this week was 17 years in the Zac Brown Band for me. So, I mean, I've been doing it for so long, and we do we're on a tour with Kenny Chesney right now, playing football stadiums, dude. I mean, walking out and playing in front of 80,000 people, dude.
That's
it's
insane.
Nuts. I'm from a really small town in middle Georgia, bro. I graduated high school with like less than 100 people. And to me, I still pinch myself and I can't believe how awesome it is, you know? And so anyway, no, I don't know what temperature it's going to be where. I have a leather jacket in my bag at all times. I have a short sleeve black shirt in my bag at all times. And then I just roll out.
So you're just ready. You know? That's it. So I have a confession I have to make. I have a confession, and this is I have to apologize to your friend and band leader, Zac Brown, and to a family from Nashville, Tennessee. This is a true story. So in 2015, I was in Nashville doing some things, and I was staying at the Nashville, the Marriott Renaissance, right in town, right in the heart of town.
Yeah.
And I got on the elevator. Now, at the time, my beard was coming in nicely, and I had on my kind of trademark gray beanie, and I'm just standing in the elevator, and a family walks in and they freak out on me and like, we love your music. we just saw you. Could we take a picture with you? And I did it. And I stood there, and it took me a second because I didn't know whether they thought I was Kerry King or whether they thought I was Zac Brown, because those are the two. Yeah. And I feel bad because I went home and I told my wife, and she goes, "You're a horrible human being." And I said, "I am." And she said, "You know what's going to happen?" And I said, "No." She goes, "One day they're going to meet the real Zac Brown, and they're going to have that picture, and they're going to want him to sign it. And he's going to look down at it and either have a panic attack because he doesn't remember this or remember looking like that, or he's going to be like, 'This isn't me,' and you're going to ruin their worlds." And I'm like, well, either way, I won't be there. So that's their problem.
You're good either way. You've escaped it.
Now
there was one guy who told this story one time about how he got a steak dinner with his wife on his anniversary because he looked like Zac, and the chef was like, and the owner was like, "Right this way, sir," because we were in town or something. He was like, "I swear to you, man, I'm a good guy. I never said anything. I never said I was or I wasn't. I just went where he told me to." And I was like, "Hey, dude,
I can't even say I'm a good guy.
Go for it.
I'm horrible. I'm a horrible human. I could." So, and it could have only happened in Nashville. Anywhere else in the country, it wouldn't have happened. So, now that that's off my chest, we can proceed. But before we get
I'm going to give you...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to give you one thing. Who do you think that I get? You get two choices. Name two people you think that I would get.
That's...
Just go.
I can't. I won't. I refuse to do it. I refuse to do it. You look like a lot of dudes.
Russell Crowe?
You do look like Russell Crowe.
I get Russell Crowe. And Waylon Jennings.
Well, if people, Waylon Jennings, yeah, I mean, those aren't bad guys to look like. You got to, not that.
I mean, I think I look like Waylon Jennings.
It's a good look.
Like Waylon Jennings could straight up be my dad,
which is fantastic. All you got to do, you probably already know
I'm down with it.
Dukes of Hazzard theme song, just play that everywhere you go, and you're fine. You
just a good old boys.
So the music is the low-hanging fruit because you're super, I mean, this is your life. It's what you do. But one of the things that I think fascinates me the most about you is this whole other facet of your life. So the education. For those of you that don't know, Zach's an author. I think he's written 5 kids' books, children's books, right? Or 6 at this point in time.
Yeah, I've written six books. The 6th one is coming out this year.
And you kind of have this passion, and you talk about it a little bit on your website, that you're an advocate for this early onset education and learning and emotional development. I just wanted to, those aren't accidental traits that you pursue, right? There's a story, there's a reason this is near and dear to you. And I was just hoping maybe you'd share a little bit, kind of enlighten everyone out there in the world why this is a part of your life in the way that it is.
For sure, man. Yeah, it's been a really unique journey. Basically, it starts with when the band started having success, I felt very uncomfortable about that, coming from such humble beginnings in a small town. My mom and dad are old hippies, and I loved being appreciated. I loved all the stuff that came on, but I wasn't really cool with being famous or anybody even thinking that. I just wanted to be a regular dude. And so when it kind of took off, I bought a small house on a river in my hometown and just went fishing with my dad all the time while everything kind of blew over. And because I knew that with my personality, me loving being around people, I could kind of probably get swept into this stuff, And we were already just going. We were doing 200 something shows a year, man. We were just constantly gone. And so it was like I really needed to kind of chill out. But there was a part of me that was talking to my mom. I was like, I just don't feel like the universe is balanced. I feel like I'm getting so much and I'm not really doing anything to get back. And there's this weird thing to where people were like wanting my autograph, and that feels weird. And she was like, well, why don't you, make something that you can sign and they can buy it and then give that money to somebody else. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's a cool idea. So I started helping this a center in my hometown that takes people who have developmental disabilities. And my uncle was actually a person who could never learn to read or write or do math. But he would take tickets at the football games and the baseball games, and everybody in town knew him. He was like the most popular person in town, but he was the guy with the big glasses and the suspenders on the moped in the small town. That was my uncle, So I started helping out that place called the Gilmore Center, and then that kind of led into me writing my first children's book. Is just kind of I don't know, man. I wanted to do a project. There was this guy in Atlanta named Donnie McCormick, who was he was in a band called Eric Quincy Tate, doing dark, soulful, improvisational blues on Capricorn Records before the Allman Brothers were doing it. So wow. If you get a chance and you're into the Allman Brothers, check out Eric Quincy Tate, because you'll kind of see it. Whoop-ass guitars with Southern rock, dark improvisational stuff. It was but Greg Allman came out and looked like a Hollywood hero, and Dwayne Allman could play the ever-living bejesus side of the guitars, and they had great songs, and kind of the rest is history, But so Donnie McCormick was kind of like the godfather of this Atlanta blues scene that I was in, called Northside Tavern. And I wrote an album and I handed it to him, and I knew if he didn't like the album, I was kind of be like dead in that scene, because he kind of was like the Don or whatever.
He's the
and I wrote a song called Goodbye. Yeah. But in a real low key way. Sure. I went there for 2 or 3 years every single night and never said one word to this guy. He just sat in the corner, Wow. So, but everybody who was cool and in the inn knew him and hung out with him and all that stuff, and I wasn't there yet. So I handed him my record, and there was a song on there that I did with Oliver Wood from the Wood Brothers called Goodbye Lullaby. And Donnie loved the tune. So I came back like a week later, and one of my buddies was saying, man, Donnie's just going crazy about that song on your album. He's like, it's the best song that he's ever heard, or has heard in a long time, And Donnie came up to me. He was like, man, that song reminds me of being a kid. He was like, and it's been a long time since I felt like that. Because the whole idea of the song is that you just kind of outgrow this idea of the freedom and youthfulness of just being able to play and be in the yard and, doing your thing. And after a while, it's like goodbye lullabies. There's no more lullabies. You're a real ass, grown ass man, Yeah. So Donnie passed away, and I became really great friends with him. And in honor of him passing away, because he was a poet, he was a painter. He was just the most creative individual I'd ever met in my life. And when he passed away, I made a promise to myself that what I'm going to take away from him is to be creative in any area that strikes the muse, you know? And
Mm.
so I wrote this short story about a girl who had a crazy laugh that was a true story. I went to Zach and we were hanging out and he was like, how did a writing retreat go? And I was like, it was good, man. I wrote this cool little story. He was like, let me hear it. And I read it to him and he was like, dude, he had 3 kids at the time. And he was like, man, that'd be a great kids book. And I could see Donnie like popping up over my shoulders. Like, you thought it was going to be Scorsese movies, didn't you? You didn't think it was going to be children's books.
Right.
So I heard the magic words, like, you should do something with that. I started writing children's books. It connected with teachers. I taught guitar lessons for a long time before I was a touring musician. So I really connected with kids. I'm also the guy at Thanksgiving who's sitting at the kids' table talking about like what we're going to get into instead of how my knee hurts with the old people, you know?
Yeah.
So as time went on, man, it got more involved into education. I'm one of those kind of people. I'm very passionate, you know, and I have a lot of empathy for other people, and I love kids, and I have a lot of teachers that help me out and meant a great deal to me. I also still teach at a university, so I really appreciate the student teacher relationship. So long story short, I learned a lot about what was going on in our education system, specifically early education. And it's so grueling that there's no way I can't help, man. And it ultimately solved this thing for me to where I live such a blessed life. And this is my way of giving back. So it just kind of tied the room together.
Yeah, sure.
Using a Big Lebowski quote, you know?
Yeah, yes. The rug did tie the room together. I mean, do you find that it's hard for you as someone that's so creatively overwhelming? Like you can tell just from talking, right? It's like you have all the ideas all the time. It's like, well, is it hard for you to focus in? Is it hard for you to focus in to delineate when it's time to write versus when it's time to music, when it's time to family, or do all those things just sort of bleed together?
Yeah, they all kind of bleed together. I mean, I have probably would be diagnosed with like ADHD or something like that, but I can hyper focus. Like I can sit down and practice guitar for like 5 hours and in my head, it'll seem like maybe about 45 minutes. So I can sit down and do anything for extremely long periods of time, and not get burned out and then all of a sudden it's like a little thing breaks in my head and I just go, oh my God, dude, I need sleep bad. And then I fall asleep and, you know, sleep for like 8 hours or whatever. But I've worked really hard on with my wife and with my family on that never taking the hit as much as possible. I mean, I need to earn a living to keep a roof over my kids' heads. And, you know, I want to be a part of like giving back to the world. I want my kids to grow up with a father who is, you know, inspiring them to give back to other people, you know, and all that. So, but I try to not let other kids, like helping the education system or helping other kids get in the way of my own kids and my own family. So that's the biggest hurdle. And I constantly try to check in with my wife as much as I can and just make sure like, am I doing enough, you know, and you know, she'll let me know, which is great, man, you know, and in a positive way. She's not like a ball buster or anything like that, you know? So
that's her job. That's behind every great man is an even greater woman. Right. So the reality
she's
is
awesome.
It just sounds, again, the Zac Brown Band schedule and life sounds overwhelming just by itself. Right. I mean, it like you said, it's this entity that is ultimately its own universe at this point in time. You guys are one of the most road-worn bands out there. I mean, you talk about the Allman Brothers, and that's a lot. That's what it reminds me of a lot. It's like, well, we're just going to get in the bus, and when the bus stops, we'll get out. And until the bus stops going, we're just going to keep getting in and getting out, getting in and getting out. And over the years, is that a conscious decision you guys made when it all started, or is that just basically how it happened as you were going along?
Well, we were all players, so we were all playing 4 nights a week, blues stuff, you know, I mean, whatever we could do. I mean, we were all like local road dogs anyway, you know, so, and everybody in the band can really play. I mean, there's no like, you know, I mean, that's what's, I mean, I went to school and got a degree from studying music. Some of the other guys have put in so many hours. But the one thing that's really interesting is Zach had kids pretty early. And so we always came home. There was never staying out for extreme like months and months and months. I mean, if there was a way for the bus to get home or us to fly home and it cost money, Zach was like, "We're going home. I got to see my kids." So we've always kind of been, even for like, except for the very beginning when it was pretty grueling, we were trying to get off the ground. But for like the last 10 years, man, we mostly would leave on Wednesday, come home on Sunday. So we would be in town on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah.
or leave on Thursday, so it hasn't actually been that bad. I mean, for considering I have other friends who stay out for months at a time, and
Sure.
and I'm really glad that, especially now that I have kids, that it gets to work out. But we're road dogs at heart, dude. I mean, the pandemic happened. We were at home for a week, and we were like, "Oh, this is great," we're off the road. It's like everything's on pause, and then like 2 weeks later, we're like, can we play anywhere? You know. So
So, with that in mind, based on just the flexibility and the versatility you have to have, is there one single go-to guitar on the road every time? Is there one that's like, this has got to be there, or I'm not showing up?
yeah, so I have an Ibanez guitar that I bought. It's an artist model, Ibanez artist. It's probably worth $600, maybe. Man, I bought it when I was a kid. And that's the guitar that's my guitar. I mean, out of all the ones that I own, I love guitars, so I've got a pretty cool collection now. But that guitar is the one guitar that if something were to happen to it or whatever, it would be devastating. It wouldn't be good for anybody else because I mean they'd have $500 in their hand in a pawn shop and give them 150 for it,
Right.
So, but something about the guitar, it's really light, it's really resonant. It kind of sounds like a Les Paul, but it kind of sounds like a SG. It's like right in between there. It's not as thick as a Les Paul. It doesn't have the bass in the bottom end, which is interesting because when you start playing with so many people, like I was a big 335 guy through a super reverb. Like that was kind of my thing. I could get a super wide spectrum of tones with that combination. I could get in the country world. I could really get deep into blues and rock world. And with the right pedal and settings and stuff, I could get into like the kind of metal stuff. Really, it wouldn't be like
Nice.
scooped mid stuff, but
Right.
it'd get sluggy. But when I started playing in the band and we filled it out, there's too many people. There's an organ player, there's a fiddle, Zach's playing nylon guitar, there's a bass player, there's percussion, and the 335 was just too full. And so I kept kind of trying to find a guitar that didn't have so much bottom end, but still cut through. And ultimately, that Ibanez guitar was the one.
So you write a lot though with the band as well. So when you're writing, now
Yeah.
that you just mentioned that, do you write with those sort of sonic boundaries in line as you're even writing a piece of music? Are you thinking about, well, the organ will have to do this, the percussion? Are you doing that as you write, or when you write, is it just you and your guitar and this is how it comes out?
Yeah, I'm thinking about all that stuff. I mean, I play organ in the band
Yeah.
as well and play pedal steel, excuse me, resonator guitars, some banjo, some things of that nature. So, Clay's the one who plays pedal steel. And so there's another multi instrumentalist in there as well. So we kind of swap back and forth. And then there's a woman, Caroline Jones, who just joined, and she plays a lot of different instruments as well. So now, like if I'm writing, I've been working on the intro to a new song, and Zach was like, "Man, I want this to have like a kind of a Tom Petty vibe." And so I just instantly went into listening to a bunch of Tom Petty intros, and it's like, God, man, that is so hard to do. I mean, it's kind of like that weird George Harrison thing where like a little goes a long way, man. And so I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do a Tom Petty intro. I think Tom Petty does Tom Petty intros, but I looked at everything that, Zach was kind of hinting at because I understood. He was like, man, we need this iconic intro that's basically a little goes a long way. And so I started writing with that in mind. And, instantly I basically take the intro, put a beat to it. I use a Superior Drummer, and because I don't like writing music without drums at all, whether it's a shaker or just kick four on the floor. I got to have some kind of beat going on to just kind of get me getting in the groove. So with this particular tune, I do this one up thing to where I'll take an idea I'll do like as many variations of it as I can. It usually starts busier and then gets less busy. I start pulling notes out of it, and then I document all of that, and then I move on and I come up with a completely different idea. And I do the same thing. I just one up it as much as I can to where it's like, and it'll eventually kind of birth. It'll be like, that's the melody that that's the one for this particular take. And then I'll do it again. And I'll usually try to do it, I don't know, man, anywhere from 3 to 50 times. It's like according to where if I hit it and I'm like, this is it, then on the third time, then I know. But sometimes I'll get to where I'm like, oh, I'll start swapping guitars. I'll stop playing slide. I'll pick up a Strat and get into that like out of phase thing. And sometimes I'll, start fooling with pedals and get weird. So, I mean, it's just kind of according to where it goes, but that's usually my kind of go-to for creating, stuff with that band, to figure out kind of what like an intro would be, or, cause I think that I write a lot of the like guitar licks and stuff like that. And if I can't do it, then I'll pass it off to Jimmy, the violin player, or I'll pass it off to Clay, the other guitar player and organ player, and just be like, dude, you can hear like what I'm trying to do. I just can't figure it out. I got like 60% of this together, and they'll be like, oh, here you go. And then they'll come up with stuff creative. And then we'll, as a team, we'll figure it out. So dude, it's so awesome. I mean, I've been in a room.
It sounds like a great
so
process.
Many people before. Here's the thing about the Zac Brown band. I've been in a room with so many people before and trying to create stuff, and everybody's like, what is your idea? And I'm like, I think we should do something like this. And like, okay, cool. Well, I'm like, what are your idea? And they're like, well, your idea is good. And when you get in the room with the Zac Brown band, everybody has great ideas, and everybody is got enough like sense and IQ as a human to know to like be flexible in that person's idea when they need to like say something, and there's no ego. So it's just a bunch of really good musicians all trying to make the best shit that they possibly can. And it vibes every time, dude. Every time we get in a room together, it's like it does a thing,
So with that in mind, with that process, and obviously the amount of time you guys spend together on the road all furthers that process too, because you get to know people you get to know one another's brothers and people, and you're like family. So when you're writing, is there any outside influence or pressure exuded by the label or management or anyone else to take the songs or the music in any particular direction? Or do they just leave you to your own devices at this point in time?
Yes, Zac has been really adamant about that from the very beginning, of very little input from anybody other than us,
Wow.
And yeah, which has been really killer. I mean, dude, he's a really intense artist. I mean, like I've met a bunch of people who are artists, but he is a artist at the core, like he wants to do things differently. He doesn't want to do the same record every time. He likes pushing boundaries. He likes trying new stuff. He kind of comes up with these, kind of bonker ideas at the time, and then we do them and we're like, dude, I don't know how that worked, but it was great. So for me, my favorite artists were always risk takers, Stevie Wonder, David Bowie, all of these people who were, their first album was nothing like their last album. And,
Right.
and I would much rather be in a band that was taking risk and falling on their face, because you only get one time, you only get one life, and nobody gets out alive basically, So
Right, yeah.
I would rather go for it and get the ridicule than I would play it safe and not take the adventure. That's just me personally though,
The more successful and the longer you do this, do you find it's harder? You've taken so many risks and you guys have done so much. Is it harder to push yourselves to whatever the next, because nobody knows, whatever the next level or the imaginary benchmark is? Is it a challenge at this point, or is everyone still in that same mindset?
Man, I think the world is changing so much, so there's always kind of something new to write about or something new to kind of do, like the integration of, in the last 10 years, of electronic music into like every style of music has been wild. And Zac was very adamant about that. That's not something that I personally am like overly attracted to. But he was like, man, he really got into that, like how good music sounds when there's samples and things of that nature. And he went in that direction, and it was like, cool, dude, there's a lot to learn here, in my opinion, And then, there's stuff like we recently he'd never been like a big Tool fan.
Hmm.
So, we turned him on to Tool. Some of the guys are metalheads, and we turned him on to Tool, and he was like, whoa. So, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the albums coming up, we don't do some crazy in an odd time kind of thing, like, and we've done some of that stuff in the past before but anyway, man, yeah, it's kind of endless, dude. I mean, there's always something to aim for and to try to make creative, in my opinion. I don't feel like we've kind of peaked or stifled or anything really.
Sure. So let's rewind for a minute. So you start, you're in the band, you guys are building up, and then you break through. It becomes apparent to everyone. Okay, you break through. How long after you break through does the thought occur to you, I could probably afford to buy some really nice gear now? Let me start looking for some new gear. What is that process like for you when you realize it's actually a reality?
So my mother was a financial aid director at a college. And when I was like 9 years old, I started getting my allowance. My parents were super broke when I was young. My dad was a carpenter, my mom was a teacher. So, um, but my mom went back and got her master's degree at night, working two jobs basically, like going to work and then going to get her master's degree. And then we kind of could start affording nicer stuff and things of that nature because she got a better job. But when I was 9 years old, I had to get money deposited into a checking account. So like my $5 or $3 or whatever it was back then would get deposited into a checking account, and I'd have to write a check to, like, if I bought baseball cards at 9 years old, and I had to like tally this thing up and all of this stuff. And so I got to where I didn't even spend money because I was like, this sucks so bad. I don't even want this stuff. And my mom was like, you have like $45 in your checking account, right? And I was like, what? She was like, yeah. I was like, that's like a box of baseball cards. I was huge
Yeah.
into baseball cards, and I was going to go with my friends and be like just a total pimp and buy a giant box of baseball cards, and we were all going to go to the house and eat shitty gum and
Yes.
and open up baseball cards. So I did it, but I wrote the check, and I remember my friend being like, "Dude, you're like my dad. Like, you just wrote a check." And at 10 years old, I was like, "Yes, I
Yeah.
did."
Yeah. I'm an
So
adult.
anyway,
Yes.
to answer your question, dude, I don't do anything without there being some kind of overly analytical financial understanding about it. So everything I've ever bought in my life, I know how much that I can fire sell that stuff for, or whatever. So I know the value of all of the guitars and everything. So I've been really picky about making sure that the guitars that I bought were always something that I was going to gain money on,
Oh, wow.
or or something like that. So like when my first big guitar was a 55 Les Paul Gold Top. And I bought it like 10 years ago. I mean, it's worth double now,
Yeah.
but
Of course.
it was, it was one of those kind of things to where I walked into Carter Vintage. Sturgill Simpson was in there, and he had just been on tour with us. And I was like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" He was like, "Hey, what's going on?" I walk in, they had this guitar there. There's a guy in Atlanta named Sean Costello who played at Northside Tavern. He had a 54 with like a wraparound. And so I wanted the Tune-O-Matic, but I'd always wanted a gold top Les Paul with P90s because of him. He was a great friend of mine. He sadly passed away from an overdose, but when we were all in that scene. And so as a kind of commemoration to him, I was like, man, I want a gold top Les Paul, dude. So I had some songwriting stuff happening. Things were going good. And I was like, I'm going to go look at this guitar. I go in, I play it. I come out, and Vince Gill is standing there, and he goes, "Man, you sound killer on that gold top, dude." And I was like, am I dreaming right now? Like, this is Vince, he's a great guitar
Right.
player.
Yeah,
He's like, "Man,
absolutely.
you sound good on that guitar." And he said, "I'm going to miss that thing." And I was like, "Is it yours?" And he goes, "Oh, no, I buy them. I don't sell them." He's like, "It's just been in the store, and I played it a couple of times." And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
"Okay, cool." So I go to the car, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, "Man, this guitar's too much. There's no way." And then I go home back to the hotel, and I'm sitting there thinking like, Vince Gill said I sounded good on that guitar. And I'm just sitting there, and my ego is just like,
Yeah.
and I called Christy, who owns Carter Guitars, and I was like, Yeah, can I get that guitar? You know, like drove a
Oh,
million miles an hour back up there to get it, you know?
that's
But yeah, I
amazing.
have some killer guitars, man. And the cool thing is they all kind of have similar stories to where like you can tell like if you follow the universe into signs, there's something that'll show up to where, you know, something's like it's meant to be, you know, and
And one day we're
um
going to find out Vince Gill got a cut of that guitar sale just to go out there and tell you that so that he
yeah,
he can make some
that would
money on
be
the back end.
awesome.
It would be the best. He does that with everyone that comes in and plays something. He just follows them out to the parking lot and says, "You sounded really
Man,
good
you
on."
sound great on
He's
that
got
burst, dude.
he's got it written on his hand on that Les Paul, right? That was the
Yeah.
be amazing.
Got your name
That's
memorized and everything. Coy, you sound great on
so
that.
we insert guitar here. When you played it, okay, outside of the shop and all that had worn away, you brought it home, you played it. Did it feel sound impact you emotionally, psychologically? Did it do what you thought a mythological guitar of that
Bro,
caliber would do?
so in all ways. I mean, that guitar kicks all the ass. I mean, it just there's something up P90s, something about necks from that wood. There's the whole thing.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
I mean,
Time.
everything about the guitar checks every box for me as far as the patina on the guitar, the feel. I mean, it's raunchy too. So like you get into some Blackberry Smoke s Southern Rock, a la Black Crows kind of Marshall amp turned up, let's get it kind of thing, and it wants to eat lunch, dude. You know.
So what did you
So
plug that guitar into when you got home? What was the first thing you plugged it into? Do you
uh,
remember?
probably I like collecting amps as well, so
Of course.
I probably put it in through um I have a twin, I mean excuse me, a Fender Pro. It's like an early Marshall kind of sounding amp, and I've got a super reverb. And to me, if I can get something dialed in through a super reverb, turned up, you know, like past six, seven, eight. I know that amp probably better than I do just about any other amp, and I can get a lot of different tones out of it. So my first go to when I grab a guitar and I want to know what I think it really sounds like, I plug it into that amp and kind of start tweaking some knobs and pedals and seeing what all I can do and run it through the paces. That's kind of my litmus test, my
Sure.
NS10s, if you will, of the
Yeah.
studio. You know,
That's a good thing, though. I mean, a lot of guys don't have that. They buy something that sounds great. It doesn't have to be something super old or expensive, but you buy something at the shop, you hear something at the shop, you don't realize what you're playing through, what's going on, what's happening. You get it home, and you're kind of like, oh. They instantly have that buyer's remorse, or that how come this doesn't sound the same? So it's cool that you have this amp that you're intimate with that can basically
yeah,
confirm what you think you're hearing or not hearing. That's pretty
for
awesome.
sure. Yeah, I bought a Vibrolux, a '69 Vibrolux, and had it black faced at a really young age. I walked into this guitar store up the road from my house in college, and it was like a couple $100. And I called my dad, and I was like, "Dude, they got this really old amp that sounds really good." And I was really into BB King at the time, and all my other friends were into Fish and like the jam band scene and all that stuff. And I was diving back into like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and BB King and all of this stuff, kind of going backwards from all where all my friends were going. And so my dad said, "Well, how much money do you have saved up?" And I think it was like $400, and I was like, "I have $250 saved up." He's like, "Well, I'll drive over and give you the rest, then you can pay me back." And I was like, "Cool," to give a chance for us to hang out, and then and he always did that. As I was growing up, I'd get like about $100 away from something. He'd be like, "I'll go ahead and get it to you. You just pay me back." So I could go ahead and have it. And as a carpenter, he was really into tools, and he knew you needed all your tools. And so he basically instilled in me like, these are tools, man, and which makes buying the guitar a lot more financially sound. When you're like,
Sure.
this is a tool,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he would always tell me that I couldn't sell anything unless I talked to him about it because he was part owner in all of it. So my dad's got
Nice.
about 5 to 7% ownership of all the shit I've ever bought, and I have to call him and be like, "Hey, remember that amp that I bought?" But
Yeah.
anyway, long story. About 20 at like 20 years old, I started playing through a half version of a Super Reverb, which is a Vibrolux. And so to get the four speaker version of it, I already knew what that sounded like because I've been playing on it for 5 years, with the smaller Vibrolux version, because those are basically the same amps except for one's beefier and bigger, but they kind of do a very similar thing. So
Sure. Yeah.
that's why I know that amp so well.
How long did it take you through this journey with Zach Brown Band to find the right gear that would work in that context with all of those musicians doing this in all these different venues all across the country, different climates, different everything else? Was that a process, or did you kind of have it dialed from the get-go?
It's still ever going, man. Like I just recently decided to take that Ibanez guitar off the road, and I got into Mule Resophonic guitar or Mule casters. So they make like electric guitars. Matt, the guy who owns the company, is just one of the most solid dudes ever, and they make really good guitars. And a lot of people play slide on them. So I played those for a couple years, still play them. And this year I decided to bring that Ibanez back out. But my tech and I went through probably 2 years of me bringing out almost every amp that I own to see if it could beat the amp that I currently have out. And I play Fuchs Overdrive Supremes, which are basically like a Dumble clone.
Yeah.
And they're great sounding amps, but they're super honky, man. The way I've got it set up. I mean, it's like, it's super weird. Like I had a blonde bassman with white knobs and one of the best sounding amps like I ever owned. And I took it out on the road and I was like, this is going to be my amp. And it had a lot of bass to it. The highs and the mids were kind of soft, and it just didn't cut at all, man. The band and all the organ and all the different instruments just completely smothered it. So you kind of have to have a speaker amp combo that is really narrow and just kind of holds a certain frequency. And that's one of probably the biggest eye-opening experiences has been to find out where instruments sit in a mix. Like that's been a big journey, understanding what a certain amp does and what it does to like sitting in the mix. So like to me, Marshalls have a little bit more like low end mid and a little bit more, and then they have some high sizzle to them. So they kind of sit a little bit further down in the mix, whereas Blackface Fenders kind of have a little bit more top end mid kind of stuff, and they sit a little bit higher up. At least that's where I place them and I hear it. I mean, everybody, this is all subjective, but
Sure.
So anyway, it took a long time, but I still am kind of on that. The band guys call me the Tone Ranger because I'm on the constant search for, the new thing or whatever. And I dive into wormholes, man. I'll get into, pedals, and I'll be into a pedal phase for a year and a half and buying and plugging them in and everything else. And I'll find what I want. And then it's like 2 weeks later, I couldn't tell you anything about any of it. I just completely dump the hard drive and move on. Yeah. And then I'll get into cars or motorcycles or whatever. I don't know, just something completely different.
Oh, it's amazing. So I have this question. I mean, it's relative. Like you said, music is subjective, but obviously the Zach Brown Band gets associated with country music quite frequently. Sure. But I feel like you're so much, I almost feel like you're more country adjacent than you are a country band. Is there a feeling about the way you guys are categorized in the band? Do you not care? Obviously it doesn't matter. You're the Zach Brown Band. You guys are your own thing, but I'm just curious how sort of that, because that's a very specific industry, the rock industry. You have all these different sort of expectations. Has that ever kind of factored into the fact, well, because we're aiming for country this or country that, because that's what we're associated with, we need to go this way or that way? Or does that ever play into anything you guys do?
I mean, we definitely try to, how do I say this? Like honor our fans, you know what I mean? So the fans are the most important people, so we know that a lot of people that come and listen to us are country fans. So let's give them some country music, but we also don't underestimate their musical intelligence. So we know that like they probably would know Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. If you're an Alan Jackson fan, and you like country music, then you might or might not have heard Sabotage. But if we come out and we do a slamming version of this song that you probably heard on the radio at some point in your life, and we kill it, then they're going to be like, whoa, that was totally crazy. I didn't see that. And then we kind of, so we honor the fans and honor the genre and things of that nature. But I definitely don't think that we have ever been someone who was like overly concerned about any of that. We just kind of, we did what was honest, we did what was genuine, and we tried to. Man, the religion is the song. I mean, we really try to. If this song is like leaning in a rock way, then let's call the rock gods. You know what I mean? And if it's leaning in like a country way, then let's super serve that thing. You know, and if you really bow down and kind of let your ego get out of the way, the song will kind of tell you what it wants to do. And everybody in the band is really good at kind of, you know, like bowing to that deity, you know?
This is pretty awesome. I mean, and you've been in the band long enough to where I think as a group, as you mentioned before, you've seen the process behind the scenes change so much from needing to be in a rehearsal room or a studio to everyone having studios at home, studio on the bus, putting things together, people living all over the country in different places and then bringing tracks together. Do you like to be together with everyone when you record, or do you like to just kind of piece it together, or does it go song by song? What's your personal preference?
The best recipe for the band to me is when we all get in a room with rough ideas of songs, we arrange them together, and then everybody goes back and sheds on their parts and kind of comes up with a lot of ideas. Like I was talking about that one up thing, I'd kind of have that together. Then we go in the studio, we get together, we start playing them, and all of a sudden you start going, oh, the fourth version of that intro is the best one, like the way this is vibing. And then you go in that direction. But we don't ever record. We did some stuff on the pandemic. We don't ever really record like full albums and stuff, like not together. You know, like we're always in the same room, and you know, and we'll do some stuff to where, you know, like I'll do a guitar part or something at my house after the fact, you know, because it needs this thing, and there's no need for me to drive all the way up to Nashville when I have, you know, a professional studio in my house, basically, you know. So, but we very rarely that I can think of have like really piecemealed stuff together, other than the pandemic when there was no way of really, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't really have. I think that we're a kind of all get in the same kind of room kind of band, you know.
That's a beautiful thing. I mean, again, no right or wrong answer.
Oh, I love it.
I'm just curious because some people that do the amount of touring you guys do and that have been together as long as you have can't wait to not be with those people anymore. And now the recording and now it's possible to make a great sounding record across state lines, international lines, whatever. It's always great to hear that you'd prefer to be with those human beings in the same space, capturing that same sound together. I think that's encouraging to everybody.
Yeah, we've been through a lot, man. I mean, there's been you know, we're brothers, and so brothers go through it with each other, you know. Yeah. But I think the most kind of what's the word I would say? Most surprising thing I think for people who are fans of the band or people who just kind of know of us is that we laugh more. I mean, dude, there's more inside jokes. There's more cutting up all day long and laughing. When we get together, it's nonstop, you know, flipping names around and trying to play on words and ribbing each other and all this stuff. And it's all kind of this safe way to where you know the boundaries. So you know, it's like, can you stay within the limits to where you don't actually tick anybody off or make anybody's feathers get ruffled, but you just keep the ball rolling. And I'm a big proponent of that. I mean, my dad's a big jokester and a funny guy and stuff like that. So I'm kind of one of the dudes who's always trying to, you know, keep the ball up in the air with joking and stuff. But I mean, we've been doing it 17 years, and, you know, we just played Atlanta this last weekend. It was a hometown show, and we got on every show we get on a bus together and we all warm up together. So we'll play a bunch of bluegrass tunes and everybody will pick and kind of get their chops together and stuff like that. And that's when we start throwing one-liners around and joking and things of that nature. And it's good. I mean, like this last weekend I had tears in my eyes from just stuff that we were saying in the jokes and everything, you know, because everybody's really funny in the band. So that's the most beautiful part about it is we keep laughing, you know.
That's fantastic. This is one of those, I'm going to ask just because of the way you've described the journey. But normally this is one of those like hokey, dumb Hallmark questions that you get asked in a podcast, but I think it's apropos for where you started versus where you've been. If you could go back and tell young Coy anything before as you're getting started going out, anything you've learned that could have saved you some heartache, some drama, some stress, some anything along the way when you were younger that you'd impart wisdom-wise to your younger self?
Man, so I teach a music business class and I talk to a lot of people who are young and I try to instill in them some things that I've learned along the way. And I I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't give myself any advice of anything that I've done. The things that I've failed at, I learned more from those things than I ever would have if they would have went right. I've really tried to be someone who's calculated in my decisions. I I'm blessed by beyond means by having two really amazing parents who taught me how to know myself, how to taught me how to be responsible, to taught me how to like have critical thinking skills, how to communicate with other people how I'm feeling and understand how other people are feeling and being empathetic and stuff. So I mean, dude, I make mistakes. I overcalculate stuff. I think too much sometimes. There's some stuff that can get me anxious. There's stuff that I'm constantly trying to learn, and everything. But that's the biggest thing that I tell people who are younger is like if you make if you look at all the angles and you know that this is a smart decision and you take the jump and you completely fail on all degrees, the amount of information you're going to get from that is so much more valuable than you could ever possibly imagine. And all you got to do is just get up and do it again. you know, my version of that is probably safer than some other people's. I've always been someone who's like really calculated, like some people just go and buy guitars that they like and they don't ever think about like understanding the industry of guitar market to understand like, okay, this guitar, I have a friend who sells guitar. Hey man, 55 Les Paul Gold Top. How much was that worth like 7 years ago? I don't know, like 10 grand. Okay, wow, it's worth 20 grand now. How much do you think it'll be worth in 10 years? Probably 40. It's like, okay, this is probably a good thing for me to do.
Sure.
So I do the research, man, on everything. I mean, everything, single thing in life. If I'm doing a CD, I find out the whole scape of the land, as much information as I can, but I'm a sponge for that kind of stuff. But that's the biggest thing I would tell myself back then is like, dude, take the risk, go for it. Because if you're going to fall down and bust your nose, you're going to get up and wipe it off, and it'll fuel you to like take another one to the face, man, and I don't know.
Well, that's good advice. I mean, the fact
Yeah.
that you wouldn't change anything alone, I mean, that's good advice. But you talk about, so you going in all this stuff, we talked about the music, we talked about the kids' books. Is there a road where those two converge and you do music for kids or you do something
Yeah.
that's, that takes both those ideas to their logical conclusion? Talk to me about that because I find that whole thing fascinating, quite honestly.
Yeah, man. So I've been writing books for a long time. I listen to I'm either listening to Pantera, Helmet, Run the Jewels, old Ray Charles. Everything that I listen to is basically intense in a like moody way. There's nothing that I don't really listen to like happy music. And never have really. I mean, I'm one of like, or either
Yeah.
just be like, oh my God, this is so sad. So somebody was like, man, you should write some music to go along with these books. And I was like, boo, no way, dude. I don't write kids music. When I was younger and I was around bands that would write kind of funny music, I just thought it was so lame. It's like, dude, that's just not me. So we ended up writing a tune one time for a project I was working on, and it was a kids tune, and it was like the most fun I'd had in a long time with music. Then we wrote another one, and it was really exciting because I didn't have to think about like how much my heart hurt. I just got to be really positive and energetic for like, hey kids, you can do this stuff. You're awesome. Like get at it. That's like kind of the thing that I came from. So I did a kids album called Music for Tiny Humans with my buddy Carlos Sosa, and it did really well. It was out. It made some Apple playlists for kids and stuff like that. And so we just finished up a whole nother album, and we started it in the pandemic, so we couldn't use other musicians. So he and I played everything on the album,
which is
And
awesome.
that was when I was calling you because I was like, hey, dude, I need a
I,
couple lessons on Superior Drummer because
yeah, I remember.
we can't get we can't get drummers over to the house right now. And so we dove really into all the Toontrack stuff, man. That was where, a lot of the stuff on the album is, all of it's programmed drumming, which is awesome to since I've always been such an organic drum guy.
Hmm.
So to take a left field and be able to learn how to make drums on your tracks that sound great and they're really manipulative. I mean, you can like make them sound more organic and you can kind of humanize them a bit. And I play drums too. I mean, I'm not a great drummer, but I know enough about it and have been in bands enough to know like how drumming works. So we're in there like shifting stuff around and changing the fills up. Like, um, so, so man, it was really probably one of the most, um, I don't know how I would say it, like fast learning, diving in deep, really rewarding times with creativity and music and the computer. Because a lot of times I'm pretty decent at Pro Tools and stuff like that, but I'll get bogged down in that stuff where I'm like, man,
Sure.
I got to update this thing. What's going on? Like, how come the plugin? And then
Right.
I'm like, dude, and then I'm lost. I'm out of the creative zones. But when we got Superior Drumming rocking, and I got the drum sets that I wanted, and we started fooling around with easy keys and easy bass, and and all of that, man. It was so awesome, dude. Because I was able to have this creative, this instant creativity that was really fast paced, and with some of it we went back and retracked. We went back and retracked like with my vintage P bass and things of that
Yeah.
nature. But when we were just in the zone, Carlos had a keyboard, I had a keyboard, we were all hooked up, and we were using all this stuff.
What's so funny about when we connected about this stuff was you were so excited about the kids' music that the first time we talked, you had left out that it was its own project with you and another partner. So when I got off that call, I'm like, the hell, Zach Brown's doing a kids album? I'm like, that's gonna be heavy for kids. I'm thinking about him talking about writing ballads about kids missing the bus and shit, and I'm like, man, this is gonna be, how is this gonna work? And then it wasn't until I talked to you again that I realized that you had this other thing, and then that's when I started looking at the Red Door, and I was like, holy cow, he's got this whole other full-time job basically that he's losing himself in. And it was cool. I mean, the pandemic sort of is that. It was a horrible time, obviously, for humanity in general, but
Yeah.
for creatives being locked away with nothing but their time and attention to devote to things creatively based, there was some solace for a lot of us. It was like, wow, thank God, technology came through at that point in time. That was one of those
Yeah,
times
for sure.
where no one was
Video
complaining about the
technology.
computer. Yeah, made life good.
Yeah, and yeah, man, for sure. It made it that connectivity and that thing that we were missing really possible. The cool thing about you guys though, man, is that and one thing that we talked about this before, and we were like, you were like, man, we don't have to talk about Toontrack on here. I just want you to know that, right? And I was like, well, I want to because your name is actually on the thanks for the new album, the new kids album,
Oh
like, and it's
man,
only like 7 people's names on there.
this is
But
crazy.
like that's how important this stuff was to the making of that album. It was just like, and the other thing is, so I do a lot of visual art. Like I write books, I work
Yeah,
with illustrators. I'm constantly like making videos that have illustrations and stuff in them. And the one thing that's really cool about you guys is like when the image that you see, to me, when I'm working with like a certain drum set and the room changes and that room looks like dope and the drums look like, man, it makes me look like I want to play them, and
yeah,
the way everything kind of is, I'm a very visual person, and the way they look and everything, it's like once you start, some person might get that and say, man, that looks cool, who cares, whatever. Somebody like me who's constantly involved and like I know how much work goes into making sure that the shine on the edge of that drum looks real, and somebody's got to do all of that stuff. And
yeah.
so I remember texting you not too long ago because you guys did came out with an organ,
Yeah.
And I sit at an organ every single night and I was like, dude, it looks great. Like, I mean, I know how much hard work it is to make these things not look kind of like cartoony, you know?
Our art department
And
and our graphic designers, our interactive designers, are the guys that do all that stuff in Sweden are in a class and of an ilk beyond anything I've ever experienced in any industry. Because to your point, you and I both know the majority of musicians are just like, yeah, I get it, it's an organ, and they don't even pay attention. But that never
yeah,
mattered to anyone on our team ever. It doesn't matter if anyone else ever notices all the details. It's important to us that the details are there. This is going to be the best looking version of whatever it is that we can do. And so I
yeah,
appreciate you bringing
totally.
that up. And I'm sure the guys are going to
Well,
love hearing that as well, because they obsess about this stuff.
and you
They
could
obsess
tell,
about
man.
it.
I mean, and I know how much hard work it is to like pull that stuff off. So there's kind of like a nod. Not only does it sound good, like you guys do your homework, obviously, on making sure like the sound is what it's creating. So that comes first. But all of that other little extra stuff is like so much hard work. And it ultimately comes down to, it costs more money to care more. And at the end of the day, I think it makes for a better product. And it's also it shows that you guys are really trying to like step up and be that thing in the market. And I find there are some people within the market that are kind of flat-footed. And I feel like there's about to be some kind of turn, over the next 5 years as things get faster. And I feel like guys like you and some other people are going to be the people who rise to the top of all of that stuff
Well,
because
thank
of the
you.
fact that
From your
you
mouth
guys
to
you can
God's
tell that
ears.
yeah, you can tell that you care, which is really killer.
Well, let me ask you this then, as we kind of wind down here, and at the time of the recording this, obviously over the past 24 months, this has been a huge topic of conversation in America, and it's AI, and the first generation of the AI revolution, and it, like any technological-based anything, it always affects creativity in the arts first, whether it's music, movies, video, that always seems to be the first to go. How do you feel, given what, again, we're at the very, very precipice of where this will go and what it will do. But because you
Oh
also
yeah.
do visual arts, you do all kinds of illustration, photography, that you do writing, and you do music. Those are the three areas currently experiencing this amazing, new technology. How do you feel about it, just in general? And again, I'm not looking for you to get on a soapbox and make a moral declaration about it. But I mean, as someone that's creative, I
Yeah, yeah,
see all
totally.
the sides of the argument. So how do you feel?
So there's obviously the idea that they could take over and kill us all. So like I first have
Skynet.
to acknowledge
Yes.
like maybe, but
Sure.
I also, try to live by this thing called the four agreements. And one of those is to not have expectations of outcome. I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. I live up the road from an airport. A plane could land in my house any day and smash all my shit. You know what I mean? So I don't walk around fearing that. But I also
Right.
know that like anything can happen at any time. Sure, the robots could take over the whole world. I mean, sure. The world I want to live in right now is try to be as optimistic as possible because it's just a better, more fun life to live, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I'm not naive in the fact that I think that some crazy stuff could pop off, but I also choose to try to go in the like, well, what makes me feel best, thinking that some cool stuff is going to happen. So, like, kind of quoting that and putting it over on the side and getting it out of the way. I think that I'm really excited. I'm super into researching AI. Like I read about it every night for probably a couple hours and try to watch as many videos of new stuff that's coming out. And I have things that I'm going to be able to do within the next year or two that I've wanted to do since I was probably 20 or 21, early 20s, that would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to pull off. And there's a
Mm.
possibility that through stuff that I've already created, that I'm going to be able to make things for really cheap that are on the quality that and level. So for me, I'm really excited about the idea of the creativity aspect of it because as technology's been advancing, it hasn't been so much about the quality of things being the most important. It's been the content of it.
Mm.
Like, is your idea good? Like
Mm.
that's why
Yeah.
short videos on TikTok really work because I mean, if it's funny and it's like janky quality, then it's still really funny,
Yeah.
and so I think that 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 there's some really exciting things for happening. I mean, I think you're going to be able to be in a DAW and you're going to be able to say, type in rock drums, and then there's going to be it'll create a beat, and you're going to be able to have that beat come up, and then you're going to say multi-track that for me, and it's going to break that drum set down into, 10, 12 tracks, and you're going to say, delete the overheads, and then it's going to delete the overheads, and you're going to be able to say, give me a bass groove that's on a P bass that's like this, and that's all going to be within, a single workstation. And you're going to be able to basically like write and create all of this music at the same time. But I think that where the gap is going to really happen is people are going to think that, okay, well, anybody can do it. And music's been around for so long, and it's such a primal thing, and it's so complex to where there's only 12 notes, and there's billions of songs that have been created and billions of melodies that have been created. If it was that easy, then everybody would be doing it. And I don't think that having a robot or a computer like help with that is going to necessarily steal the soul out of it. I don't feel like my job is necessarily at risk. But I do think that it's going to change the game in the sense to where you could possibly get to things faster, and you can create things that you wouldn't have been able to create for a different price point. And to me, that's really exciting. I'm not worried about like if music is going to become sterile. I mean, there's an app called Suno, and you can type in some commands and it'll just create a song for you.
Yeah.
I think my daughter could listen to a real song and then listen to one of those songs. And I ask her, which one do you think AI created? She's 7 years old. And I would suggest that pretty much 9 times out of 10, she would be able to tell that, because it doesn't sound real yet. And it's exponential, so it'll probably sound real in 6 months.
Sure.
But I still think that there's something about like, say, for example, so much of music evolves around an artist. Like the way they think, the pain they've been through, the trauma that they've realized, how they're immersing themselves into all of this and coming out on the other side as a phoenix through all their life experiences and expressing it to you. That's the human experience. That's what we are all connected to. And that's what creativity is sharing the human experience. You can't do that if you're not a human. So I don't think that there's a fear for me of like somehow or another robots becoming so human, because a robot wasn't like abused as a child and then learned how to overcome like an alcoholic, parent or father or whatever, and then had their own deals with alcohol or something. This isn't my story, by the way. I'm just making stuff up.
Right.
Then rise to this occasion to where they are
While you're
now
talking
superior.
about that, though, I'm picturing this television show where the Terminator robot is now a kid and he's got an alcoholic Terminator father, and I'm picturing the whole. I'm like, well, but what if we could write that sitcom? What if the T-1000 only hunts humans because he is the product of a bad environment? What if?
Yeah, dad's just like killing like Quaker
motor oil is just coming down. It'd be
Yeah.
amazing. Jim Cameron, copyright 2024. You can't take our idea. It's our idea.
Coy Bowles started it.
No, I'm
in
with
on
you.
that
So
too.
Coy Incorporated, all rights reserved. So I have, along those lines, my last question for you with that is more about the songwriting aspect. So I do agree with you. By the way, I think having lived long enough to see a bunch, I remember people were pirating it. I mean, we talk about it like old man yelling at the sky, but like people recording songs off the radio, then people ripping DVDs, then Napster, then we've been through it a million times. The industry's still here. Yeah, it's changed. Yeah, things are different. Yeah, in many ways, like you had pointed out, creativity is much more accessible, which I think is a good thing. Success and creativity are two totally different things and not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So I do, again, to your point, I think the most successful people will always be people. There'll be people that actually have imparted part of that essence into what they do. One of the things that's a hot button topic at the time you and I are talking, and it's just kind of getting started, is and neither a disclaimer to everyone watching. Coy and I are not lawyers, so we're not weighing in any sort of judiciary comment here. So, but there's this growing consensus among performance rights organizations like BMI and ASCAP and all of these places that ultimately monitor mechanical and sync licensing and help songwriters earn their living, that AI companies may be stepping over a line by training their algorithms on copywritten music material and without licensing it or or sort of approaching the right process? Just basically, hey, I'm learning. This guy, like you said, had a whole lifetime of writing songs. You know, you take someone like a Barry Manilow, a Neil Diamond, a Bob Dylan. Here are some of the greatest American songwriters of all time that have put their entire life into this work and then protected it. And we're just going to take it, borrow it, learn from it, and make it, what would be a derivative work under copyright law of it. That's the big sort of sticking point we're at the time we're filming this. Now, 5 years from now, when you watch this, that'll probably all be solved and the robots will be our overlords. But right now, today, this is what we're talking. Do you have any thoughts? Yeah, exactly. As a songwriter, is that something that comes into your mind? You know, someone that ultimately earns their living through the work they put out. From that aspect, does that bother you at all, or are you okay with it?
I'm progressive thinking when it comes to technology. I'm really excited about how AI is going to interact with kids who have learning disabilities. So so the idea that our early education system, I'm going to get to the question, but I want to kind of use this example as a way. So our early education system ultimately is underfunded and understaffed for the needs that we're aware that kids really need now, So from 0 to 7 years old is a huge part of a person's life. Like basically that time frame, you're kind of who you are for the rest of your life after some of the things that happen to you in those things. That being said, if somebody has a learning disability and they have a teacher who's a special instructor that can sit down with them and show them how to do things, and then they go and work with the AI because there's not funding, there's not manpower to do this, but this kid sits down every day for 30 minutes with a computer that is basically training them in the same way to overcome their learning disabilities, say it's dyslexia or whatever it might be. That's better than that kid only getting one human interaction a week. That if they get the one human interaction and then they now get multiple interactions with AI, So like I'm excited about where technology is going, and I'm excited about the prospect of it, in all different areas. To answer your question, I'm split because there's a part of me that's excited about this, and I go, well, that's how humans do it anyway. Humans are just, when I write a song, I listen to Bob Dylan, I take a bunch of Bob Dylan stuff. I even expressed it earlier when I listened to Tom Petty and I came up with a Tom Petty light. That's what AI is doing. They're training themselves off of, but, because we are humans and we have free will, there's kind of a different line. And I don't think you should ever be able to compare like a robot's rights versus a human's rights. Like a human's rights are inevitably the most powerful and the ones that should be considered the most. And a robot's rights are actually the rights of the human that are operating it. So I really think that it shouldn't have the right to go through stuff unless an artist gives them the right. If Neil Young's really into AI and he's like, take my whole catalog and search through it and see if you can make the best version of me for here ever after, then that's his right. But should a robot, or a person be able to tell a robot to do that without his right? I don't think so. So that's kind of where I stand with it ultimately.
Yeah. Well, and like we said, time will tell. Obviously, there are people that make a lot more money than you and I with a lot more at stake that are involved in this conversation. And then there's the politicians. And we're literally just at the beat. As you point out, we're just getting started. We are literally, AI is just really starting to become something everyone talks about. And to your other point, man, is it accelerating quickly? It's not. This isn't like in 5 years there'll be more AI. This is like in 5 weeks from now we could have a totally different conversation about where AI is at. Yeah. And it is exciting.
I'll say this to kind of like wrap a bow on the AI topic. And this is going to be pretty big, and some people might agree, some people might not. But I have a group of buddies that are really smart guys, and they've worked with all kinds of different companies and stuff like that. And they're heavily involved and worked in the tech industry for a long time. I told one of the guys that I thought that AI might be the biggest thing to ever happen to the human existence, like up there with fire. Like, I mean, as far as how it's going to change the direction of like the human experience, I mean, I think it's going to be bigger than the Industrial Revolution. I mean, I think that we're at the precipice of it now, like you're saying, but I think if we were to, promise each other that 5 years from now we're going to do another podcast, and we're going to like, okay, like where is it now? I think it's going to be mind blowing where it's going to be then. And I think when my kids that are 7 years old, then when they're my age, that it's going to be bananas, dude, compared to what it is right now, because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
It's so unbelievably exponential. And once it's factored up to where it's like up there, the cost of it is going to be just so nuts. It's going to be so low to have that universal information.
Yeah.
You know, like you won't need to, you won't need to have $5 billion to find out like how to do some kind of crazy neutron cell power, you know, like.
No, you won't need $200 million to make a movie. You won't need $100,000 to make I mean, again, like you said, it's going to bring opportunity for creativity to anyone that's willing to take the opportunity, but also to your point, the output is always going to be relegated to the person actually utilizing the tool. It's never going to get to the point where that robot wrote his own song with his own AI.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it does, it's just not going to have the impact. All You Need Is Love by the Beatles is still going to be all you need. You know, Zeppelin, Black Dog, all these songs that we've had are always still going to be there. And that's exciting to me as well. So I don't think we're going to wait 5 years
you're only going to be able
up.
to you're only going to be able to sing Georgia on My Mind like Ray Charles if you've lived, like you only sound like that if you live that life, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, but I'm really excited about it. I think there's a lot to come, and I think it's going to be an interesting journey. And above anything, man, the human existence is all about adaptation. So it's like either get on or get off, but it's gonna happen either way. So you might as well.
There's two things you can do: watch and nothing, because it's happening one way or the other. So, totally. I don't care what order you do them in. Watch and nothing; those are your options, dude. Yeah, I'm gonna let you. You're a busy man. I'm gonna let you get back to your life. I'm going to land this plane and tell you that from the bottom of our hearts. I mean, we count ourselves lucky to be able to interact with people like you. I mean, the fact that not only that you use our tools, but that you'll take some time out to talk to us. It means the world to us. It never gets old to us. Everyone in this company, before they do whatever they do for the company, is just a fan of music. So anytime we get to talk to anyone that does what you do, or even all the countless other jobs and occupations and career vocations in our industry, it's crazy to us. We're just always humbled. So thank you for your time, your energy, and your effort this morning, man. You are always one of my favorite people to talk to, and I am looking forward to being able to do this again.
Yeah, back to you, man. And I really appreciate you from like what we were saying about my dad. Thanks for creating the tools, man. You know, because as a creative person, I need all of those things, and you make great tools, man. And it really makes my life. It fulfills my heart, my mind, and my soul for being able to hear the stuff that I hear in my head and study all the music that I've studied and be able to use your tools to make music that it hopefully will affect, you know, kids and humans and adults and everybody in a positive way, man, you know, so.
It's our pleasure. I'm going to look this way. It's not because I don't love you. It's because I have to address these people. Ladies and gentlemen, that was today's episode of the Sound Horizons podcast, brought to you by Toontrack. Don't forget to tip your waitresses and your waiters, and know that we love you. We'll be back again next week talking to someone else interesting and amazing. We hope you have a fantastic day.